The crisp sound of Natalie's Chanel heels clicking against my hardwood floor should have been my first warning. My mother-in-law rarely visited unannounced, and when she did, it was never good news. I watched through my home office window as she stepped out of her silver Mercedes, adjusting her pearl necklace with the same precise movements I'd observed at countless charity galas over the past 10 years. "Victoria, dear," she called out as I opened the front door, her voice carrying that particular mix of concern and condescension she'd perfected over the years. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." I stepped aside to let her in, noting the manila envelope clutched in her perfectly manicured hands. "Just finishing up some design revisions for the Riverside Hospital project. Would you like some coffee?" She settled into my living room armchair, the one Marcus and I had bought at an estate sale in our 3rd year of marriage, when we still thought authenticity mattered more than brand names. The envelope remained on her lap, unopened but impossible to ignore. "I'll get straight to the point," she began, her composure faltering slightly. "Marcus asked me to deliver this to you. He's been incredibly busy with the Lakefront Tower development, and well, he thought it would be easier this way." Easier. The word hung in the air between us like a judgment. 10 years of marriage, of building the most successful architecture firm in Chicago together, and my husband couldn't spare 30 minutes to hand me divorce papers himself. I reached for the envelope, my fingers steady despite the racing of my heart. "Thank you, Natalie," I said, my voice calm. "I appreciate you making the trip. Actually, since you're here, would you mind giving something to Marcus for me?" I walked to my desk and pulled out a cream-colored envelope from the locked drawer, the weight of it familiar in my hands. I'd been carrying this evidence for 4 months, waiting for exactly the right moment. This seemed as good as any. Natalie took it, curiosity evident in the slight widening of her eyes. "What is it?" "Just some documents I think he should review," I replied with a small smile. "Business matters, really. I'm sure he'll find them very interesting." After she left, I stood at my window watching her Mercedes disappear down the tree-lined street. I didn't need to open the divorce papers to know what they said. I'd known this was coming for months, ever since I'd noticed the charges for jewelry I'd never received, the weekend business trips that coincided with Jennifer Hartford's social media posts from the same luxury resorts. Jennifer Hartford, 26 years old, daughter of Richard Hartford, the real estate mogul whose approval Marcus had been chasing for 3 years. Marrying her would give Marcus the connections he'd always craved, the entry into old money circles that his middle-class background had never quite opened. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd spent the last 4 months uncovering something far more damaging than an affair. I'd discovered that the business we'd built together, the firm that bore both our names, was built on a foundation of fraud that went back almost to the beginning. It started with Jordan Chen, my talented young architect who'd been working on the documentation for the Riverside Hospital bid. She'd come to me 3 months ago with what she thought was a simple discrepancy in the contractor quotes. "Miss Reeves, I'm probably just reading this wrong," Jordan had said, spreading the documents across my desk. "But these numbers for the electrical work don't match what's in our official submission. The subcontractor quotes we submitted are 20% higher than what the actual bids show." I'd dismissed it initially. Marcus handled all the bidding and contractor relationships while I focused on design. That was our division of labor, agreed upon when we'd formed the partnership 7 years ago. But Jordan's discovery planted a seed of doubt that grew into something I couldn't ignore. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern so extensive it took my breath away. Marcus had been rigging bids for almost every major project we'd won in the last 5 years. He'd work with preferred contractors who would submit inflated quotes. We'd win the project based on those numbers. Then Marcus would negotiate kickbacks when the actual work came in under budget. The clients paid millions more than they should have. The contractors got guaranteed work, and Marcus pocketed the difference through a web of shell companies. The evidence was devastating in its thoroughness. Bank statements showing suspicious transfers to accounts in Delaware. Emails between Marcus and contractors with coded language about adjustments and considerations. Most damning of all, recordings from Eric Morrison, a contractor who'd grown tired of the scheme and started documenting everything, including cash payments made in our firm's parking garage. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Jordan. "Just saw Mrs. Reeves Sr. leaving. Everything okay?" I typed back. "Better than okay?" The endgame has started. Marcus called within the hour, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. What the hell did you give my mother? Victoria. I settled into my chair, phone on speaker as I reviewed the Riverside Hospital designs one more time. These blueprints represented everything I believed in: honest work, clean lines, spaces designed to heal, everything Marcus's corruption had tainted. Documentation, I replied calmly. About some business practices I think we need to discuss. I don't know what you think you've found, but you're making a serious mistake. The only mistake I made, Marcus, was trusting you. But we can talk about that later. I have a meeting with the Planning Commission in an hour. I hung up before he could respond, already knowing what would come next. Marcus couldn't afford to have those documents exist. Not with the Hartford wedding on the horizon, not with 3 major developments in the pipeline that his new father-in-law was financing. He appeared at my home office door 2 hours later, letting himself in with the key he still had. I'd been expecting him, had even put on a fresh pot of coffee. We need to talk, he said, his usual polish cracking to show something rawer underneath. Whatever you think you know, there's context you're missing. Everything I did was to build the firm, to give us the success we both wanted. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same place where we'd sketched out our first design together 11 years ago. Then explain it to me, Marcus. Explain how defrauding our clients, how rigging bids and taking kickbacks, how all of that was for us. He sat, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the ambitious young developer who'd approached me after a lecture I'd given on sustainable urban design, who'd talked about changing the Chicago skyline, about buildings that would outlast us both. When had that vision become corrupted by greed? The development business is complicated, Victoria. Sometimes you have to work within systems that aren't perfect. The contractors I worked with delivered quality results. The clients got good buildings, at inflated prices, I interrupted, with materials that cost 20% less than what we charged. Don't insult me by pretending this was about anything other than money. His expression hardened. What do you want? Money? A bigger settlement? Name your price. I want what I've always wanted, the truth. But since you've never been able to give me that, I'll settle for something else. I pulled out a USB drive from my desk drawer, its small red light blinking steadily. Everything's here, the bank records, the emails, the recordings Eric made of your parking garage meetings. I have multiple copies, of course, stored with people you don't know about. You're blackmailing me? I'm negotiating, I corrected. You wanted a divorce. Fine, but it's going to be on my terms. The doorbell rang. Through my office window, I could see Eric Morrison's truck in the driveway, and beside it, a car I recognized as belonging to Catherine Walsh, the attorney who'd done the legal work for our firm since the beginning. That would be my lawyer, I said, standing. Shall we discuss terms? What followed was unlike anything I'd experienced in our 10 years together. Catherine laid out my requirements with professional precision. Full ownership of the architecture firm, fair division of personal assets, including the house I'd inherited from my grandmother, and Marcus had somehow gotten his name added to. And most importantly, his complete exit from any role in the company that bore my maiden name alongside his. You're asking for everything, Marcus said, his voice rough. The firm is my life's work. Our life's work, I corrected quietly. The difference is, I built it with integrity while you used it to steal from people who trusted us. Eric spoke up then, his weathered contractor's hands steady as he placed another folder on the desk. I've been documenting everything for 18 months, Mr. Reeves. Every cash payment, every inflated invoice, every coded conversation. I couldn't keep participating in fraud, not when I saw what it was doing to good people. Marcus turned on him with sudden fury. You're just angry because I wouldn't give you the Thompson building contract. I'm angry, Eric agreed, because you made me choose between my integrity and my livelihood. And I'm tired of watching Victoria take the blame for project overruns that were really your kickback schemes. The weight of 10 years hung heavy in the room. I could see Marcus calculating, looking for angles, trying to find a way to manipulate the situation in his favor. But for once, he had no leverage. There's something else you should know, I added, reaching into my bag. I pulled out a worn leather journal, the one Marcus had given me on our first anniversary. You told me to write down my dreams, my goals. I did. I opened it to show pages filled with my handwriting, sketches of buildings I'd wanted to design, competitions I'd wanted to enter, collaborations with sustainable materials companies. Every dream I'd written down had gradually been redirected, reshaped to serve Marcus's ambitions rather than my own. Look at the dates, I continued. See how they change after we became partners? How they get smaller, safer, more aligned with what you wanted? You didn't just defraud clients, Marcus. You systematically undermined my confidence, convinced me to step back from innovative design work so I wouldn't look too closely at the business side. Catherine cleared her throat. Mr. Reeves, I strongly advise you to consider Mrs. Reeves's terms. They're remarkably reasonable given the circumstances. The alternative is federal prosecution for fraud, which would likely result in significant prison time. I'll need time to review the terms with my own attorney, Marcus said finally. You have until tomorrow morning at 9, I replied. The Planning Commission meeting for Riverside Hospital is at 10. I'd like this resolved before then. As Marcus left with Catherine following to ensure he didn't take any firm documents, Eric remained behind. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I know this isn't easy. I watched through the window as Marcus's car pulled away. No, but it's necessary. Thank you for coming forward, Eric. I know it wasn't easy for you either. After he left, my house felt both emptier and somehow more mine than it had in years. I walked through rooms filled with memories, touching furniture we'd chosen together, books we'd collected, the carefully curated life we'd built. How much of it had been real? My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Heard from the grapevine that something big is happening. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I typed back. Tomorrow we start rebuilding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the moment I'd first suspected something was wrong. It wasn't the affair that had hurt me most, though the betrayal stung. It was the realization that Marcus had been systematically destroying my professional credibility while using my designs to win projects he then corrupted. The fake, negative reviews that had appeared online after my sustainable housing concept had been featured in Architectural Digest. The sudden client concerns about my competence that always seemed to come right before Marcus would step in to save the day. The way my most innovative designs would be scaled back for practical considerations that somehow never applied to Marcus's preferred contractors. I'd spent 3 months tracking down the source of those reviews. They'd all been written by the same marketing firm Marcus had hired, using language that subtly questioned my judgment while praising his business acumen. It was manipulation so subtle I'd almost missed it. The next morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night spent confronting hard truths. I dressed carefully, choosing the navy suit I'd worn when we'd won our first major commission, paired with my grandmother's vintage Cartier watch. Small acts of reclamation. The meeting was set for my office at the firm, neutral ground that wouldn't be neutral much longer. Marcus arrived with 2 attorneys, their expensive suits and practiced expressions meant to intimidate. Catherine was already there, having spent the morning ensuring all our documentation was in order. My terms haven't changed, I said once everyone was seated. Full ownership of the firm, fair asset division, clean break, no contact, no interference, no attempts to damage my reputation in the industry. Marcus's lead attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, reviewed the documents. Mrs. Reeves, she said, these terms are quite one-sided. Surely there's room for negotiation. There would be, I agreed, if we were discussing a normal divorce. But we're not. We're discussing the price of avoiding federal prosecution. I slid another folder across the table. Inside were emails between Marcus and Jennifer Hartford, but not the romantic kind. These were business discussions about how Marcus planned to use his new Hartford family connections to expand into New York real estate, cutting me out of the firm entirely once the marriage was secured. You were planning to force me out anyway, I said, watching Marcus's face pale. The difference is, I'm giving you the option to leave with some dignity intact. The silence that followed was broken by my phone ringing. Catherine's expression told me she'd arranged the timing perfectly. That's Agent David Morrison from the FBI's white-collar crime division, I said, letting it ring. I told him I'd call back after this meeting. Whether that call is to tell him we've reached an agreement or to turn over all evidence is entirely up to you, Marcus. Patricia leaned over to whisper urgently with Marcus and his other attorney. I used the moment to glance at the blueprints spread across my desk. The Riverside Hospital project that represented everything I wanted architecture to be. Healing spaces, sustainable materials, design that served people rather than profit. We'll agree to your terms, Patricia said finally, her voice tight. But we'll need the non-disclosure agreement to be ironclad. Mr. Reeves's reputation is at stake. Mr. Reeves should have thought about his reputation before committing fraud, Catherine replied smoothly. But yes, the NDA protects all parties equally, provided all terms are met. I watched as Marcus signed document after document, his signature becoming less controlled with each page. When it was done, he stood slowly, straightening his jacket with hands that trembled. I built this firm from nothing, he said, his voice rough. No, I corrected gently. We built it together. The difference is, I'm going to rebuild it properly, on truth instead of lies. After they left, Catherine gathered the signed documents with practiced efficiency. Congratulations, Victoria. You now own Reeves Architecture outright. I stood at the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline we'd helped shape. Change the name, I said. I don't want his name associated with my work anymore. We'll be Victoria Chen Design. Jordan's earned a partnership. The planning commission meeting went smoothly. Jordan presented our Riverside Hospital design with the kind of passion I'd almost forgotten could exist in this business. The commission approved it unanimously, praising our innovative approach to healing-centered architecture. Afterward, Jordan and I stood in the empty conference room, the approved blueprints spread before us. Is it true? Jordan asked quietly. Are you really making me partner? You earned it. Your attention to detail, your unwillingness to ignore discrepancies even when it would have been easier, that's the kind of integrity this firm needs. 4 months later, I stood on the construction site of Riverside Hospital, hard hat firmly in place, watching the steel framework rise against an autumn sky. The project was coming in under budget because we'd insisted on transparent bidding with verified contractors. The clients were thrilled, the design was intact, and every night I slept without the weight of knowing our success was built on fraud. My phone buzzed with a message from Eric. Saw the feature in Architecture Weekly. The hospital's looking amazing. Proud to be part of a clean build. Jordan approached with coffee and a tablet showing our newest project proposal, a sustainable housing development that used the innovative concepts I'd shelved years ago. We've got 3 clients interested in the modular design, she reported. All of them specifically requested to work with you because of your reputation for ethical practice. Funny how that works, I said, accepting the coffee. Turns out integrity is actually good for business. Later that evening, I returned to my office, now free of anything bearing Marcus's name. The space felt lighter somehow, as if the removal of corruption had let in more air. On my desk sat the leather journal Marcus had given me, but now it held new entries, new dreams, new goals, all my own. I opened my laptop to an email from the American Institute of Architects. They wanted me to speak at their national conference about ethical practices in bidding and construction management. Attached was a photo from the morning's site visit. Me in my hard hat, blueprints in hand, standing in front of the hospital's emerging structure. This wasn't just revenge, I realized. It was reclamation. Every clean project, every transparent bid, every young architect I mentored in doing things right, it was all part of building something that would outlast any marriage, any betrayal. I pulled out my camera, the one I'd neglected for years while focusing on Marcus's version of success. Through the lens, the construction site transformed, steel beams catching the last light of day, creating patterns of shadow and possibility. I'd started architecture because I wanted to create spaces that changed lives. Somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten that the first space I needed to reclaim was my own. The shutter clicked, capturing the moment. Not an ending, but a beginning. I'd spent 10 years building Marcus's empire. Now it was time to build my own, one honest line at a time. My phone buzzed one final time. A text from an unknown number. Amanda Winters here. Rebecca gave me your contact. I was Marcus's first business partner, 15 years ago. He used the same playbook on me. Coffee next week? I have information you might find useful about his new venture with the Hartfords. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. The pattern continued, but now I was ready for it, armed with evidence, allies, and most importantly, the clarity that comes from seeing things exactly as they are. I raised my coffee cup toward the window, toward the skyline we'd shaped, and the one I would continue to shape, honestly this time. Then I raised my camera and started shooting. Some moments deserve to be captured exactly as they are, in all their complicated, imperfect, truthful beauty.